Can nutritional ketosis offer up cardiovascular health benefits? Oh yeah, and I've got the study to prove it. Find out the details here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website, and as always, you can engage live in the content. Come follow me. I'm over here on Instagram. Follow Jimmy Rants over on Instagram. Pretty easy to find, you guys, so go check it out. We are here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, so thank you so much for being here. We also simulcast over on my Facebook page as well as on Twitch. Twitch is the new kid on the block. I had to get rid of YouTube because it's just not letting me sign on to YouTube for live stream anymore for whatever reason. So the new live stream is over on Twitch. You can download the app. If stuff goes crazy over on the traditional social media pages like Instagram and Facebook and like what has happened with YouTube, I will be on Twitch. So come check me out, you guys. I followed your breadcrumbs to Twitch, says Paul. So, yes, thank you for being there. What can we do to make it keto? Followed my bacon bits to, yeah, there you go. Because breadcrumbs is too high in carbs, brother. But yeah, Twitch, download the app, and I am Jimmy Moore Rants over on Twitch. Somebody already had Jimmy Rants, so I should try to follow them and see if they rant, and it's a guy named Jimmy. That would be hilarious. All right. If you missed the live, you can watch it on the replay right here on the Jimmy Rants page. It will be housed on IGTV. Good morning, the Ketogenic Pharmacist. And it's also going to be over on Twitch. I see a lot of people watch the replay on Twitch, so thank you guys for doing that as well. It is going up on YouTube in archived form, so we put that over there on YouTube as well. And then you can also watch the past episodes over at JimmyRants.com. Today, you guys, is Wednesday, so that's Livin' La Vida Low Carb interview day. And today, my interview is with a girl named Bella. So Bella goes by the Steak and Butter Gal over on Instagram. You can look her up, Steak and Butter Gal on Instagram. She has a very famous recipe that kind of makes the rounds in the keto world. And so it's an egg pudding recipe. So maybe you've seen like hashtag egg pudding. That's Bella, the Steak and Butter Gal. So I interviewed her for the Livin' La Vida Low Carb show. The video of that is in several places. It's on the YouTube channel. So go look up Jimmy Rants over on YouTube and you'll find my YouTube channel, and hers is one of the latest videos. I also have it up on the IGTV at my Livin' Low Carb Man page, which you can watch and see it there. And then it's going to be airing on my podcast, the Livin' La Vida Low Carb Show, today. So go check it out. She's a carnivore queen and a half. Had a lot of interesting things to say. I think you'll like it. Okay, so speaking of keto, I've been in this space and I've been eating keto pretty much for 17 years. And what I have seen consistently over the years is one steady drumbeat of negativity against the low-carb ketogenic diet. Above everything else, above anything that you hear anybody say about keto, there's one thing that always gets people's goat. And especially as soon as you tell family members, you tell a doctor, you tell a friend, you tell anybody that you're going on a low-carb ketogenic diet, what is the first complaint they always seem to have? They're worried about your heart health. Because, well, all that red meat, all that saturated fat, all that cholesterol that you eat is going to raise your cholesterol, going to give you heart disease, and you're going to die. How many has heard that story over the years of eating a healthy, low-carb, ketogenic diet? Yeah, we all have. And so we've all heard that. Has anybody ever stopped to ask, where do you get that from? Where is your data? Because to my knowledge, there has never been a randomized controlled clinical trial that shows eating low carb, eating ketogenic, eating red meat does anything to your heart health in a negative way. In fact, I have plenty of studies that I could show you where all of the cardiovascular risk markers, namely triglycerides, HDL, inflammation, blood sugar, insulin, all of those things and many more get better when you start eating a low-carb ketogenic diet. And yet, this myth that eating keto is bad for your heart health still persists, right? You still hear it out there. You still have people that worry about your heart health. Oh my gosh, you're going to die tomorrow if you eat a steak today. And it's kind of crazy. I used to attend with all the low-carb doctors, Dr. Westman and Dr. Volek and Dr. Finney and all the rest of them. I used to attend these obesity conferences, and I remember at one of them, right at about 10-ish years ago, there was a doctor who made a presentation, and he was a cardiologist, and he said, if I was having a heart attack, I would want the doctor to inject directly into my heart Beta-Hydroxybutyrate. So Beta-Hydroxybutyrate is a ketone body. He's like, I would want them to put ketone bodies right into my chest right away. And I was thinking, well, that's kind of weird. What do you mean put them in there? But he knew. He knew from his own research. He knew from what was coming through the pipeline in the research world that ketones had a cardiovascular protectiveness to them. Yet what is it that we always hear when we hear about ketosis as it relates to your heart health? Oh, that's a very dangerous state. And they've said it over and over and over and over again to the point that even doctors now parrot. Oh, you don't want to be in ketosis. I've had many patients and many people write to me who have gone to see their doctor, and the doctor sees that they have ketone bodies based on some blood tests that they run. And one patient, I remember this very vividly, one patient said that the doctor said, oh, we need to flush those ketones out of your body because they're highly acidic and you will die if they stay there. Now, what he was referring to is ketones in the form of ketoacidosis. So those of you that don't know, ketoacidosis is a condition where you have extremely high blood ketones, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and extremely high blood sugar, and it typically hits someone that is a type 1 diabetic. It is on a rare occasion if you've got a type 2 diabetic that is severely dehydrated, they can also get into a state of ketoacidosis. It's very rare if you still have beta cell function with your pancreas. It's very rare for that person to be able to get into ketoacidosis. But basically what happens when you have elevation of blood sugar that keeps going higher and higher and higher, your body thinks it's starving, and so then it starts elevating higher and higher and higher blood ketones, and you have extraordinarily high blood sugar in excess of 240 milligrams per deciliter, extremely high levels of blood ketones. We're talking in the 20 range. Now, those of you that eat nutritional ketosis, what is the normal range for nutritional ketosis? Typically, it's somewhere around 0.5 to 3. Sometimes a little bit higher. I think the highest I've ever had is a 7.6, something like that, but nowhere near 20. And oh yeah, by the way, during that 7.6, my blood sugar was in the low 60s. And so there is a commensurate drop in blood sugar when you have appropriate nutritional ketosis that's raising those ketone bodies. But still, this notion, ketones causing harm, because those people that get into ketoacidosis, they need electrolytes, they need insulin, because primarily it is type 1 diabetics that didn't shoot themselves with insulin. They ate a high-carb meal, blood sugar went up, ketones go up, and they're in a very dangerous situation. They'll go into a coma and could possibly die. So it is a serious thing, but they're not teaching medical doctors that there is a therapeutic level of ketosis that not only is healthy, it's beneficial, it's therapeutic when it comes to your ticker. And yet you're not hearing this out in the mainstream. Until now. Now we have an amazing study that looks directly at this issue of ketone bodies as it relates to your heart health. So if you're just joining us, we're about to go over a December 2020 study. And what it shows is ketones, those little beta-hydroxybutyrate when you eat a carb-restricted diet or you fast or you take MCT or exogenous ketones, when you do all those things, you produce ketone bodies in the body. Those ketones are going to give you cardiovascular benefits. So you ready for this one, you guys? This will be fun. So this was published in the December 15th, 2020 edition of the journal, the World Journal of Diabetes. and the researchers are out of France and Poland. I'm always amazed by how some of the best studies, the researchers are not American. Like, it's okay that they're not American, but where are the American researchers looking at this? Now, I know American researchers, they have to play a game with the NIH. The NIH doesn't always fund these kinds of studies, so it is a shame that that's happening, but it's great that we do get it even when we have to get it from overseas. But the name of the study, you guys, Effects of Ketogenic Diet and Ketone Bodies on the Cardiovascular System, Concentration Matters. You can go look that up. That's in the World Journal of Diabetes, December 15, 2020, and just type in that title, Effects of Ketogenic Diet and Ketone Bodies on the Cardiovascular System, Concentration Matters. So let's read the abstract. Ketone bodies have emerged as central mediators of metabolic health, and multiple beneficial effects of a ketogenic diet include impacting your metabolism, neuronal pathologies, and to a certain extent, tumorigenesis have been reported both in the animal models and clinical research. Ketone bodies endogenously produced by the liver act, and they got some funky words in here, so stick with me, act pletropically as metabolic intermediates, signaling molecules, and epigenetic modifiers. In other words, if you have kind of predispositions for things genetically in your body, ketone bodies actually kind of shift those into a healthier direction. Yes, you have predispositions, but it's not an inevitability. The endothelium and the vascular system, so all that's in here, are central regulators of the organism's metabolic state and become dysfunctional when you develop cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, and diabetic micro or macrovascular vascular complications. As physiological circulating ketone bodies can attain millimolar concentrations, the endothelium is the first line cell lineage exposed to them. While in diabetic ketoacidosis, which we just talked about earlier, high ketone body concentrations are detrimental to this vascular, to your vascular system. Recent research reveals that ketone bodies in the lower level of millimolar, like we talked about, nutritional ketosis 0.5 to 3.0, may actually exert beneficial effects on the endothelial cell functioning by modulating the inflammatory status, because we know in the presence of ketones, inflammation goes down, senescence, and metabolism. Here, we review the long-held evidence of detrimental cardiovascular health benefits or health effects of ketoacidosis, as well as the most recent evidence for a positive impact of ketone bodies at those lower concentrations on this metabolism and vascular physiology and this subjacent cellular and molecular mechanism. So they're just basically saying, we have overviewed all the literature, we see all the ones about high ketone levels because of ketoacidosis, but we're going to introduce now those lower levels and how these lower levels and what we would call nutritional ketosis levels of ketones in the body actually are providing a benefit. We also explore arising controversies in the field, and we discuss the importance of ketone body concentrations in relation to the effects of these emerging fields. At lower concentrations, endogenously produced ketone bodies upon the uptake of a ketogenic diet, or when supplementing with ketone bodies or their precursors. So that's exogenous ketones, that's ketone esters, that's MCT oil, anything that would produce ketones in the body from a supplement. These may prove beneficial to ameliorate endothelial function and consequently the pathologies in which endothelial damage occurs. So that pathology includes having higher triglyceride levels, having higher levels of inflammation, having lower levels of HDL cholesterol, having higher levels of insulin and blood sugar. They're going to make the case that therapeutic levels of nutritional ketosis actually mitigates all of those concerns so that actually your heart health improves. What I want to know is, why don't we get this kind of stuff on front page news? Why doesn't it lead all the health programs? Like, we know why. There's a lot of special interests in big food and big pharma that don't want you to know that there are great benefits that come from eating a real foods-based ketogenic diet. And there is. So the core tip in this study, and then we'll get to the introduction, ketone bodies acting as fuel molecules, signaling molecules, and epigenetic regulators improve metabolic health and lifespan. The endothelium and the vascular system are central regulators of the organism's metabolic state and become dysfunctional in cardiovascular disease and diabetic vasculature. Ketone bodies in this more low millimole range, which is nutritional ketosis, are protective, while in diabetic ketoacidosis, high ketone bodies are detrimental. At lower concentrations, ketone bodies may prove beneficial to ameliorate the vascular function and alleviate all signs of cardiovascular disease. Now, this flies right in the face of what we've always been told about low-carb ketogenic diets. Guys, I've been at this 17 years, and that steady drumbeat year after year after year after year is keep eating that fat, keep eating that cholesterol, keep eating that red meat, and you're going to die of heart disease. You're going to have a heart attack. You're going to have cardiovascular issues. Oh, you don't want to be doing that because you're going to leave behind those people that care about you. Oh my gosh, you're going to die early. And oh my gosh, why would you do that? And the fear mongering around this specific issue, they have to fear monger because they know the truth is exactly the opposite. All right, let's get into this study. And if you just joined us, we are going over a brand new December 2020 study that's looking at the concentration of ketones and what effect those have on cardiovascular disease. This was published in the World Journal of Diabetes, December 15, 2020. And the name of the study, if you want to look it up, it's easy to just look it up on DuckDuckGo. Effects of ketogenic diet and ketone bodies on the cardiovascular system, concentration matters. All right, so we're up to the introduction now. Ketogenesis, consisting of the production of paravenous hepatocytes, basically coming from the liver is what that means, of the ketone bodies beta-hydroxybutyrate and acetoacetate using fatty acid-derived acetyl-CoA, is a physiologically important process to produce an alternative metabolic source of energy to glucose during the neonatal period. So basically when kids, babies are being formed, they're in ketosis. Shh. You're not supposed to know that. When a baby is born, within seconds of being born, minutes of being born, they could test levels of ketosis in a baby. Guess what? They're in good levels of ketosis. They are. Starvation, which we could also call fasting, or through a prolonged physical effort, all of those things can increase your level of ketones. Spontaneous decarboxylation of ACAC yields acetone, the third and quantifiably minor ketone body. So typically beta-hydroxybutyrate, the main one. When you prick your finger and you test your blood ketones, that's beta-hydroxybutyrate. That's the ketone body in the blood. When you blow into a device, that's generally acetone. And then when you pee on a urine strip, that's typically acetoacetate. Now, there are some pathways where acetoacetate does show up in the blood ketones, but typically acetoacetate can get converted into beta-hydroxybutyrate, and it's primarily the one when you prick your finger and you test for nutritional ketosis, it's testing BHB concentrations, beta-hydroxybutyrate. The biosynthesis of ketone bodies is connected to multiple metabolic pathways, including the tricarboxylic acid model, the beta oxidation of fatty acids, de novo lipogenesis, which you probably heard of before, sterol biosynthesis, glucose metabolism, and the mitochondrial electron transport chain. Don't let these things confuse you. It's just the gobbledygook of scientific research. You just kind of push through it to get to the good part. Moreover, hormonal signaling and intracellular signal transduction pathways are also affected by ketone bodies. So they're just basically laying the groundwork. Ketone bodies aren't this benign thing in your body that's just sitting there doing nothing. They're actually a part of the body's processes, and a very natural part of the body's processes. We have been led to believe, because doctors freak out and we've been told, oh, you don't want ketones in your body because it's unhealthy for you, and so they're laying the groundwork. No, it's actually a part of the normal bodily movements, and in fact, pretty much anyone who goes to sleep and the overnight fast from sleeping wakes up in the morning with at least low levels of ketosis. I remember one time I interviewed the 30 bananas a day guy, Harley Johnstone, on my podcast. He's a very well-known raw vegan. Nice guy, but just totally flawed in his nutrition. And I said that to him. I said, hardly even you wake up in the morning with ketosis, like really low levels of ketosis. Oh, no, Mike, no, I don't have ketosis. I said, yeah, you kind of do. Because that's just the way the body works. In the absence of glucose, which means when you're not eating or you're eating a carbohydrate-restricted diet or you're fasting or all the other things, you're going to have higher levels of ketones, at least start to develop. So he got so mad at me because I dared say he even had a little bit of ketones in his blood in the morning. In extrahepatic tissues, ACAC and BHB-derived ACAC serve as a substrate to produce ACAC-CoA via the enzymatic activity of succinyl-CoA. I am not a deep scientist, so I'm not going to pretend to understand what all that just meant. Just know that, kind of read the science, acknowledge that you kind of have to stay true to it, so that's why I read all that stuff to you. But yes, I know, it's gobbledygook. It's hard to keep up with when you don't know all of this. We do have some very smart people on here, including doctors, who might be able to translate this a little bit for us. So, the metabolic necessity of physiologic ketogenesis is highlighted by the fact that whole body OXCT1 gene ablation induces postnatal mortality in mice. BHB, listen to this, is the most abundant ketone body and has been reported to serve as an alternative energy source for the heart in diabetic patients. Ooh, so if you have diabetes and you need an alternative fuel source to be beneficial for your heart, ketones do the trick. How cool is that? I wonder how many diabetics, type 2 diabetics, know that. I wonder how many of them have been told, I know things aren't really kind of ticking well in your health, but if you cut your carbohydrates and you went on a ketogenic diet, you supplemented maybe a little bit with MCT oil or some other source of ketones or a precursor to ketones, you would feel better, your heart would function better. No, they don't tell them that. But that's exactly what's true. And to be slightly elevated in diabetic patients treated with sodium glucose transporter 2 inhibitor dapagliflozin, with this low ketogenic state being correlated to improved insulin sensitivity. So they're saying that the higher ketones within that therapeutic range actually improves the insulin sensitivity of these type 2 diabetics, which in turn lowers their blood sugar, which shows up on their A1C, which comes down into non-diabetic range. So a bunch of you guys have done that. They had type 2 diabetes, you went on a ketogenic diet, you started lowering your blood sugar because of this better insulin sensitivity, and now your A1C is in the healthy range, not considered diabetic, even though if you went back to eating carbohydrate again, you would be very diabetic again. On the other hand, though, diabetic ketoacidosis, in which concentrations of ketone bodies are extremely high, remember high blood sugar, 240 milligrams per deciliter, and high blood ketones in excess of 20 millimolar, that's the extremely high, is a serious complication of diabetes, typically type 1 diabetes, but it could hit others as well. Serum concentrations of ketone bodies attain high levels, and they serve as nutriment to compensate for the organ's failure to utilize glucose. So like I said, when you have extremely high glucose and there's no insulin to knock it down, because keep in mind, when you have beta cell function, it's going to knock down your blood sugar. Now it's going to struggle if the beta cell function is weak, But if you have even a little bit of beta cell function, you're going to produce enough insulin to at least try to bring the blood sugar back down before it gets to this dangerous level. But when it gets over 240 milligrams per deciliter and it ain't moving, that's when this ketoacidosis starts to kick in, where the ketone bodies rise. Therefore, ketone bodies can be either a necessary nutrient in the case of nutritional ketosis, or it's a reflection of a pathological status depending on the plasma, the blood concentration. So you're getting this now? When they tell you ketogenic diets and ketosis is dangerous, they're not talking about nutritional ketosis. They're talking about ketoacidosis. But lower levels within that moderate range of typically the 0.5 to 3.0, that's nutritional ketosis, and that's where the researchers in this study are finding the benefit. The understanding of this physiological role of ketone bodies, in particular beta-hydroxybutyrate, recently took an unexpected turn when it was demonstrated that BHB acts as a histone deacetylase inhibitor, therefore favoring histone hyperacetylation. Such processes have been associated, listen to what that does, when you have these appropriate levels of ketones in your body. It's associated with the antioxidant properties. They found that in mice models. At approximately the same time, BHB has been proposed to act as an anti-inflammatory molecule. And what it does is it targets the inflammasome itself. In addition, a novel histone post-translational modification called a PTM, termed beta-hydroxybutyrylation, which consists of the formation of an amide bond between the BHB carboxyl group and the histone lysine and amino group, has been reported. And it was this discovery that expanded the repertoire of these things and identified beta-hydroxybutyrate as a molecule involved in the epigenetic control of transcription. It's good news, guys. Like, we now have science showing this benefit that comes from ketones being in your body. So the next time somebody, and especially a doctor, tries to bring up to you, look, I'm very concerned you got these ketones in the body. If it's like that person that DM'd me a couple years ago, oh, my doctor said I need to flush the ketones out of my body. He's not understanding the process here. You don't need to flush out ketones when they're in that therapeutic lower level of 0.5 to 3.0. That's perfectly healthy. Are you getting it now? Like, I think we're mixing terms. And this has happened since I've been online as well. From the very beginning, everybody mixed up ketoacidosis, the very high blood sugar, very high 20 millimole blood ketones for ketoacidosis. They've mixed that up with this nice therapeutic lower level. And it's two different things altogether. It's the difference between having pure, clean stream water that goes through rocks and is filtered out and it's wonderfully, beautifully clean, and then having the toxic wastewater that comes from all the toilets and all the nuclear waste and all the everything. That's the difference. They're both water, but one is extremely healthy and one is extremely unhealthy. You get the difference? So the toxic water would be ketoacidosis. The stream water would be nutritional ketosis. Earlier studies analyzed the genome-wide histone 3 lysine 9, lysine 14, hyperacetylation, and DNA methylation in response to the elevated glucose concentrations in primary human vascular cells. Therein, a number of specific hyperacetylation and CpG methylation signatures associated with transcriptional upregulation of genes involved in metabolic and cardiovascular disease were identified. Chronic exposure of these endothelial cells to high glucose concentrations, this is what happens. Recapitulated hyperglycemia, mediated induction of gene ontology classes and cellular pathways, induced the upregulation of several pro-inflammatory and pro-atherosclerotic genes. These initial observations linking prolonged exposure to high glucose and these epigenetic alterations has been validated in clinical samples. So when you let that blood sugar stay high and you let that inflammation stay high because it's in the absence of having therapeutic levels of ketosis, nothing but bad things start to happen. Collectively, these data hint at the possibility that the endothelium may be amenable to pharmacological interventions targeting the epigenome to reverse epigenetic changes occurring in diabetic endothelial dysfunction and diabetes-induced endothelial proliferation. Given that the endothelium is the first-line tissue exposed to ketone bodies, and considering that beta-hydroxybutyrate has been shown to support and mediate anti-inflammatory and antioxidant oxidative features, a strong interest now has been directed in the last few years towards understanding the effects of BHB on the physiology of that endothelial vascular function. So, we review here the evidence indicating that ketone bodies, and in particular beta-hydroxybutyrate at lower nutritional ketosis levels, potentially contribute to ameliorating endothelial and vascular function in those who have metabolic disease, while elevated concentrations of ketone bodies, as observed during diabetic ketoacidosis, will contribute to complications and possibly death. Are you still with me, guys? I know this is a little more complex, but I'm trying to translate as much as possible. The overriding point of this whole study, if you get nothing else out of this entire study, just remember this. Extremely high blood sugar along with extremely high blood ketones in excess of 20 millimoles, incredibly acidic, incredibly dangerous. That right there is the toxic water. That's ketoacidosis, as opposed to nutritional ketosis, 0.5 to 3.0, and the pristine, clean water. Drink from that freely, and it's wonderful. It tastes good, and it's going to give you benefit. That's the difference. So when they talk about ketones in the body, context matters. Concentration of those ketone bodies in the body matters. Are you getting it? So they have a chart here that I think is really cool. I'm going to read what's on the chart. So in the lower range of ketosis, they say right around 1 millimole or less, you see an amelioration of endothelial and vascular functions in metabolic disease. You see improved insulin sensitivity. So all it takes is 1 on the blood ketone meter, and you're getting those benefits. If you bump it up just a little bit, you start having a modulation, with like the 3 range, modulation of HDAC activity, and that beta-hydroxybutyrylation we were just talking about. Once you hit the 7 range, listen to this, antioxidant effects, anti-inflammatory effects, pro-aging effects, somewhere between like the 4 to 7 range. Once you get above 7, you start having a compensation factor kick in, and you start getting to around 15 to 20. Here's where you get into problems. Diabetic vasculopathy and diabetic vascular complications at the 15 to 20 range. And once you hit 20, full-blown diabetic ketoacidosis and cerebral edema. That's not good. Your brain starts to get fried. You getting it now? So when you get in those extremely high levels, that's where you're seeing the negativity. Down even as low as 1.0 and even a little bit below that, you're already getting improved insulin sensitivity and an amelioration of the endothelial and vascular function metabolic disease. It has a beautiful chart in this study. I love that. All right. So let's look at the detrimental vascular effects of high ketone bodies and beta-hydroxybutyrate concentrations during diabetic ketoacidosis. The morbidity and mortality burden of type 1 diabetes, which is where this mainly happens, can be largely attributed to vascular inflammation and cardiovascular disease that are promoted by the installment of a chronic inflammatory state of the endothelium. Furthermore, diabetic patients experiencing frequent episodes of diabetic ketoacidosis have an increased incidence of morbidity and mortality due to vascular complications and cerebral edema. So keep in mind, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease of the pancreas. Basically, the body thinks the pancreas is a foreign object and it starts attacking your pancreas until the pancreas stops making insulin. That is why every single type 1 diabetic, even the ones that eat keto, every single type 1 diabetic will have to inject themselves with insulin for the rest of their lives. They have to. They don't make it anymore. There's no way for their body to make it, so they have to inject themselves. Now, when you eat low-carb keto, you inject a whole lot less insulin. There's probably not a type 2 diabetic, a truly type 2 diabetic, that needs to inject insulin. Most of the time when they inject insulin as a type 2 diabetic, it's because it's covering up the carbohydrate that they're eating. They cut out the carbs, and usually their need for insulin goes away. In type 1 diabetes, concentrations of ketone bodies can reach as high as 25 millimoles per liter as compared to lower concentrations, which are below 7, induced by prolonged starvation or post-exercise ketosis. Have you ever post-exercise tested your ketones? Not right after your exercise, because right after your exercise, your blood sugar tends to be really high. So with that higher blood sugar, because of all the glycogen that's kind of floating around in the system, it shows up as a 130, 140. I've even seen as high as 170 in some athletes that go really hard, glycolytically demanding workouts. Don't test your blood sugar or your ketones right then, because your ketones are going to be decreased. Wait about an hour or two, and in that 1 to 2 hours after exercise, once all that calms down with the glycogen in your bloodstream, and your blood sugar returns to normal, watch what happens to your ketones. It goes pretty high. It's awesome. Cerebral edema is the most serious complication linked to diabetic ketoacidosis. It's the first cause of mortality in type 1 diabetic children. That's sad. Pharmacological studies demonstrated that the activation of the NAK cotransporter expressed in the blood-brain barrier and astrocytes mediates cerebral edema formation, and the inhibition of the cotransporter by bumetanide reduced edema formation in the cerebral artery occlusion models of stroke and RANTS. In this study, in which diabetic ketoacidosis was induced by streptozotocin and BHB, they reached 3.7 millimole. The bumetanide efficiently reduced cerebral edema formation. Furthermore, in cultured bovine cerebral macrovasculars, both ACAC and BHB stimulated the activity of NAK-CI cotransporter. Again, I'm going to repeat, I don't even understand all that, so don't worry if you're like, Jimmy, I'm lost. I have no idea. Just stick with me. I'm giving you the overriding view while giving you the science, because all you sciencey geeks, I know people watch Jimmy Rants. I love it when you read science because you trip me out trying to read some of those words. Yeah, thanks. I didn't do science. I was an English guy, but I can read, so I will read. In a model of traumatic brain injury in rats affecting the blood-brain barrier integrity, BHB did not display a protective effect and furthermore caused a slight damage in the integrity of healthy animals infused with BHB. So I think what happens is they get too high a level of ketone bodies, and that's what causes these problems. All right, so let's look at lower dose BHB though, and how it's juxtaposed to ketoacidosis is actually protective for the endothelium from a cell senescence. Cellular senescence is a process that results from a variety of stress with time leads to a state of irreversible growth cessation. Senescent cells accumulate during aging and have been involved in the promotion of various age-related diseases. Cellular senescence can play an important role in tumor suppression, wound healing, and tissue fibrosis protection. However, there is also growing evidence that these cells can cause adverse effects in vivo and contribute to tissue remodeling, aging of the body, and vascular disease associated with inflammation and dysfunction of the endothelial cells and smooth muscles. Although many studies have focused on the beneficial effects of calorie restriction, which can prolong life and delay aging in various species, I think a lot of the calorie restriction, the benefits they get from calorie restriction is actually because it induces ketosis. A lot of those diets, when they're so low in calories, even if all they ate was carbohydrate, still is in a very therapeutic level of ketones that would induce ketosis. So that's kind of the oddball of a lot of those starvation studies, a lot of those calorie restriction studies, is they're so low in calories, the patients, even if they're eating carbohydrates, still are in a state of ketosis because of the energy deficit. The effect and mechanism of ketone bodies on the quiescence of the vascular cells and senescence have been less investigated. An early study indicated that beta-hydroxybutyrate supplementation will extend the lifespan by 20%. In mammals, BHB decreases the secretory phenotype associated with senescence and vascular cell senescence. In addition, the ketogenic diet significantly extended the median lifespan of mice and preserved physical function of older mice. So they're showing there's protective measures when you're in that therapeutic level of ketosis. BHB has been shown to prevent both replicative and stress-induced senescence in vascular cells and to reduce in vivo serum levels of interleukin 1A, pro-senescence marker. Indeed, senescence by beta-hydroxybutyrate is dependent on various pathways that they show here. It's also involved in OCT4A elevation by direct binding to heterogeneous ribonuclear particle A1, which induces quiescence of vascular cells and thus prevents cell senescence. So they're just still laying the groundwork for there's benefits to the whole vascular system. As aging is one of the major risk factors when it comes to cardiovascular disease, delaying or preventing vascular aging can protect against cardiovascular dysfunction. Calorie restriction induced the production of ketones. Did you hear that? They just acknowledged what I just said. When you calorie restrict, you restrict everything, including carbohydrates. Even if the vast majority of that diet is carbohydrate, you're still restricting carbohydrate and thus you're producing ketones. That delays vascular aging by preventing both replication and stress that induces the senescence of vascular cells. This prevention of senescence by beta-hydroxybutyrate is done through its direct binding of that HN-RNPA1, resulting in the stabilization of mRNA and the expression of the OCT4A. So, targeting of these processes appears to be effective in preventing and delaying the progression of endothelial cell senescence. BHB has an important role in the positive regulation of this process in the vascular system, which provides a new strategy to prevent vascular aging associated with senescence by accumulating and maintaining vascular cells at rest. Good news if you're eating for ketosis. You are protecting your heart. God, I wish this would get out there in the mainstream. This is why I do these kinds of Jimmy rants, because I don't think this kind of thing gets out there. Now, trust me, I'm struggling to read the study because it's pretty thick in the sciencey words, but the take home again, get in a therapeutic level of ketosis and you're getting beneficial things for your heart. Not heart detriment, not all the things you've heard forever of, oh my gosh, you eat ketogenic, oh my gosh, you're gonna die of a heart attack tomorrow. No, you're not. Just the opposite. You're gonna lower the age of your heart. Can you imagine if you're in your 30s and 40s now and you just start eating keto, and by the time you get to 60, 70, how the anti-aging processes of those ketones you have produced, beta-hydroxybutyrate, inside your body, and how protective that will be for your heart as you get older? Man, why would you not be celebrating this? This is amazing. So let's look at next at the ketogenic diet and low BHB levels positively affecting cardiovascular function. Obesity is a predisposition to cardiovascular pathologies, including coronary heart disease and hypertension, high blood pressure. As a ketogenic diet could decrease your body weight, indirect beneficial effects on the cardiovascular function may ensue. In a one-year multi-center clinical study aimed at body weight reduction through a very low carbohydrate ketogenic diet, body weight reduction at 4 weeks was 7 kilo. What's that, about 17 pounds? And at week 12 was 5 kilo, a reduction that was maintained until the end of the study. At weeks 4 and 12, body fat was reduced by 3.8% and 3.4% respectively after a 4-week nutritional trial consisting of a ketogenic diet supplement with some polyunsaturated fatty acids on overweight but otherwise healthy subjects. Total body weight was reduced by an average of 4.7 kilo, body fat reduced by 5.41 kilo. In parallel, listen to this, there was a decrease in glucose, dropped over 18 points. Total cholesterol dropped 16 points. Triglycerides dropped 41 points. LDL cholesterol dropped 10 points. All of that was observed in blood samples. So if the ketogenic diet is so unhealthy, having ketones in your body is so unhealthy, why are all the cardiometabolic markers, why are they getting better? Wouldn't they get worse? Wouldn't, if you were getting less healthy, wouldn't all those markers that are showing robust signs of health taking place go the other direction? Of course they would. Doesn't make sense why they vilify keto. In another 6-month study, the ketogenic diet, while not lowering the levels of total cholesterol, induced a shift from small and dense LDL particles, so the small dense LDL, to large and buoyant, so going from the pattern B, those BB size small dense LDL, over to the large, fluffy, and buoyant and beautiful, healthy, large, fluffy LDL particles. That's what happens when you keto. Those ketones make that happen. And that is associated with a lower cardiovascular disease risk. Now, we've been talking about that for many years. I talked about LDL particle and the size in Cholesterol Clarity many, many, many years ago. I wrote this book, and yet it's still showing true today. The ketogenic diet has an impact on the synthesis of endogenous cholesterol. There's an enzyme that's promoted by insulin, leads to the synthesis of the beta-hydroxybutyrate CoA, which is a precursor for hepatic ketone body production, as well as endogenous cholesterol synthesis. Saturated fatty acids, which promote cardiovascular disease, they say, decreased in the blood after the administration of a low-carbohydrate diet. Jeff Volek was the one that did that study. He also showed that women, listen to this, women, if you're a woman, listen up. Women are more sensitive to a ketogenic diet because you have a significant more increase of HDL than men. I've talked about that for many years when I've been interviewed on people's podcasts. Yeah, women have a much easier time creating HDL cholesterol, the good cholesterol. However, upon administration of a ketogenic diet, levels of fasting triglycerides do go down in both. So while it is harder for guys to have higher levels of HDL, whereas you women, it's very easy for you to have higher HDL. In men and women, triglycerides go down, and that's the telltale sign you've restricted carbohydrate enough and that you're in a good, healthy, therapeutic state of ketosis, is your ketone or your triglycerides will drop below 100. That's a telltale sign. If they're still above 100, there's something going on in your diet that could be causing that to stay elevated. All right. So let's look at the epigenetic alterations induced by ketone bodies in the vascular system. Epigenetics is the field of study about persistent and inherited changes in phenotypes and the gene expression without any change in your DNA. In other words, you have genes. You don't change genes. Some of us wish we did have an ability to change your genes. I wish I didn't have as big of ears, but that's a genetic expression that I got from my dad. And so you can't change your genes, but you can change how they are expressed. Epigenetic mechanisms to control gene expression involve the methylation of DNA, histone PTMs, and non-coding RNAs. So I don't know if I want to get too caught up in all of that. Just know beta-hydroxybutyrate does induce this epigenetic response on all of those processes that we just explained. All right, so let's get to the influence of ketone bodies on the myocardium. Cardiomyocytes are structural units of the heart that, similarly to oxidative skeletal muscle, have a high density of mitochondria. With such an abundance of mitochondria, the myocardium is capable of oxidizing various substrates to produce ATP. ATP is that energy for your body. Acetyl-CoA from glucose, that's called glycolysis, or lipids, which is beta oxidation, and it enters the Krebs cycle. Ketone bodies, which are generated by the liver, also constitute major acetyl-CoA precursors for your heart. So again, they're laying the groundwork. Ketones are a good fuel energy source for the heart. As ketone bodies are not able to complement the intermediates of the Krebs cycle, these intermediates they're completely lost. Thus, ketone body oxidation is cataplerotic, as it leads to the depletion of the Krebs cycle intermediates and an impairment of the metabolic efficiency. This must be balanced by anaplerotic substances such as circulating glucose, glycogen, glucogenic amino providing pyruvate, with heart pyruvate carbolase being the key enzyme in the heart. So I think as long as you are eating enough protein, and if you choose to eat carbohydrate, not carnivore, and you choose to eat carbohydrates, and you have glucose in your glycogen stores, all of those things are true, then the ketones are nothing but a benefit. Beta-hydroxybutyrate, as the quantifiably major ketone body in the body, has been studied on myocardial tissue from patients with severe heart failure, resulting in increased myocardial utilization in these patients. So remember earlier where I talked about hearing this researcher talking about wanting to be injected straight into his heart. If he had a heart attack, he would want ketones injected straight into his heart. That's what they're talking about here. If you have severe heart failure, heart attack, you want to get those ketones right in there right away to provide benefits. So Nielsen demonstrated that beta-hydroxybutyrate infusion in patients with this reduced the ejection fraction and improved cardiac output by 2.0 liters per minute and left ventricular ejection fraction by 8%, also reducing systemic vascular resistance by 30% compared to the placebo. The observed effect was dose-dependent, and it reached significant hemodynamic of circulating beta-hydroxybutyrate concentration in the physiological range, talking about that nutritional ketosis range, and exerted a beneficial hemodynamic effect on controlled healthy volunteers. So that's good. Early studies demonstrated that the isolated perfused rat heart at higher concentrations of BHB resulted in decreased cardiac output when ketone bodies were administered as the sole energy substrate, and the addition of glucose to reverse the detriment effect. In accordance to this data, the co-administration of beta-hydroxybutyrate, which brought them up to that 4 millimole in the blood ketone concentration, and glucose increased cardiac work and cardiac output compared to glucose alone. So the BHB gave benefit. However, pathological remodeling and cardiac dysfunction has been observed as a result of a heart-specific knockout, the gene responsible for the control of flux through the enzymes of cardiac ketone metabolism. This suggests a crucial role for sustained ketone oxidation. Hence, increased myocardial ketone utilization has been demonstrated in explanted hearts from patients who have this severe heart failure. Collectively, these data indicated that circulating blood ketones derived from a ketogenic diet may improve the myocardium function and contribute to the treatment of patients with impaired functions of the cardiovascular system. So I don't know about you. If you have a predisposition because of family genetics for heart disease, I do. If you have already existing heart disease or having some kind of issue in your cardiovascular system, are you getting the point that there might be some benefit to having these nutritional levels of ketosis? I hope that's becoming crystal clear in me reading this study here today, because that is the overriding theme. Stop being afraid of ketosis because you've been told it's bad for your heart. It very clearly, in the appropriate nutritional ketosis levels, is not. Not even close. Diabetic patients suffering from heart failure have been observed to have an increased cardiac uptake of ketone bodies as compared to those without diabetes. Chronic insulin resistance in the diabetic heart results in alterations of fuel availability and a change of affinity and utilization abilities of myocytes for different substrates, with free fatty acids becoming the preferred substrate, which leads to significant reduction of energy efficiency and the accumulation of toxic byproducts that would exacerbate heart failure and insulin resistance. Researchers have demonstrated that in diabetic heart failure, the uptake of total ketone bodies and beta-hydroxybutyrate is higher in comparison to a non-diabetic. This suggests, listen to this, that ketone bodies serve as a partial energy source replacement in the human diabetic heart. In other words, you got type 2 diabetes, you've got insulin resistance, you need ketones to protect your heart. American Diabetes Association, please put out a press release that notes this study. You got diabetes, you need to be in a state of ketosis. You need to be getting ketones in your body. And God forbid the American Heart Association get on board with this. They won't. They think ketosis is incredibly dangerous because they're stupid, number one, and they are so caught up in dogma about diet that they think somehow, some way, eating a real foods-based ketogenic diet is somehow unhealthy. We know better now from this study. This study's telling us very clearly there are great benefits if you've got heart health concerns. Great benefits. So in conclusion, in the study, as we discussed in this review, the cardiovascular effects of ketone bodies are context dependent. Context means everything. You got high ketones, extremely high ketones because of ketoacidosis, obviously unhealthy. Remember the toxic water, toxic wastewater. Or you have the healthier ranges of nutritional ketosis, 0.5 to 3.0, and that's the pristine, clean stream water. Totally different context and concentration. Ketoacidosis levels of blood ketones, 20. Nutritional ketosis levels of ketones, 0.5 to 3. And even as high as 7 or so. Those are all healthy. They try to pretend like ketosis is ketosis is ketosis. It's not the same. It's not the same. It is clear and undisputed because for decades, the high concentrations of ketone bodies that were obtained in diabetic ketoacidosis have had severe detrimental vascular effects, worsening morbidity and mortality of those with diabetes. On the contrary, though, it has now emerged in more recent years that having these lower therapeutic nutritional ketosis level and concentrations of circulating ketone bodies following dietary restriction, physical effort, or a medically controlled ketogenic diet can exert beneficial effects on the endothelium and your cardiovascular system. The circulating concentrations of ketone bodies are of primary importance on determining the final physiological effects on the cardiovascular system. So guys, go look up this study. Again, it was published in the World Journal of Diabetes, December 15th, 2020 issue. Go look it up, you guys. The title is Effects of Ketogenic Diet and Ketone Bodies on the Cardiovascular System, Concentration Matters. And my goodness, like I could have used that study circa 17, 16 years ago when I first started in this space because that was the major concern. I remember right after I lost my initial weight loss, I went to see my doctor and I told him what I did, a low-carb diet. And he's like, oh, we need to check your cholesterol. I'm worried about your heart. And I'm thinking, wow, like a patient loses 180 pounds. Not good job. He was impressed by that, but it was more, oh my gosh. Like, I wonder if I told him I did a vegan diet. Oh, wow, good job, wow. There would have been nothing to bat an eye at. But because I said the Atkins diet, it made him flip out. But I definitely want to see what you guys have to say. We're going to go here first to Instagram, then over to Facebook, finally over to Twitch. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. See what you have to say about this complicated study. Joshua says, any nurse I've talked to who isn't a learner immediately associates keto with ketoacidosis. Yeah, they always have. And I don't know any clearer than what I did here today how you explain it. Very high levels of blood sugar, 240 milligrams per deciliter and higher. Very high levels of blood ketones, Beta-Hydroxybutyrate, 20 or higher. That right there is ketoacidosis. Come on down this way. Moderate levels of nutritional ketosis, somewhere in the 0.5 to 3.0 range. And oh yeah, by the way, blood glucose, somewhere in the 60 to 100 range. This is healthy. This is unhealthy. Yes, both have ketones, but this is a therapeutic level of ketones. This is a dangerous toxic level of ketones. I think it's pretty simple. It's not hard to understand if you just, like you said, open their minds and want to learn. Kat says it cannot be not beneficial for our body. I'm 100% sure that healthy human bodies shift in and out of ketosis a few times during the day. Once that mechanism is broken, food changes need to be made. You're right. And in fact, Kat, I said, I think before you got on here, that when you fast overnight, you're producing ketones. So it makes sense that there are fluctuations in ketones throughout the day, even if you're not specifically eating keto. Yep, that's how time-restricted feeding works. You take time off of eating. Yeah, makes sense, right? Britt says, I have Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune of the thyroid, and my inflammation is up, but honestly, I've gone off the wagon. Would you recommend keto or would carnivore be better to help bring that inflammation down? That's a separate question from what we're talking about here today. Definitely DM me, Britt. But seriously, just get back on it. Like, don't delay. Just get back on either one. I do like the carnivore just for the simplicity of it, but yeah, do it. Do it. But if you have specific questions about it, definitely DM me. I'd be happy to help. Angie says, my family doctor told me keto was just a starvation diet. I'm like, dude, I eat way more now than I did. Well, technically, Angie, your doctor's actually right. I have heard within research circles, and I know all those guys in the research world, I have heard within research circles that they call a state of nutritional ketosis fed starvation. Because what it does is ketosis mimics the effects of starvation. I kind of hate starvation. It has a negative connotation. I like fasting. So it's fed fasting, basically, is what ketosis is. Now, there are benefits that come when you actually fast, the autophagy and some of the other benefits that happen, the human or the growth hormone that happens. But that's kind of the truism about it, that ketosis does kind of mimic the effects of fasting. So that's why your doctor might think it's starvation. But yeah, I mean, you're eating plenty of calories, mostly from fat and protein. That's going to give you benefit. And so if he wants to call it a starvation diet, you should say, thank you. I am trying to create ketones so I can protect my heart. Thanks for noticing, doc. Not to be snarky about it, but you could definitely drop some mad knowledge. Definitely show him this study. I think it would shock him a little bit. All right, thank you, Instagram. Let's pop over here now to Facebook, see what you guys have to say. Kira says, I heard a doctor once say that if he was having a heart attack, he'd want to be injected with ketones for the best chance at survival. Yeah, like I said, I had that doctor from the stage at one of the obesity conferences I went to right at a decade or so ago. And he said that, like, from his talk, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, these things are magical. But it only shows that we are a glucose-dependent society. Like, we're so fed by and fueled by glucose as our primary fuel source that we've forgotten our first love when it comes to energy source for the body, and that's ketones. So it's really interesting, which is why I'm glad these days we have exogenous ketones. We have, I've got some ketone esters in there. These companies, they send me all this stuff all the time, but I've got some ketone esters. I suppose if I ran into issues, I don't anticipate it, but if I ever ran into issues with my heart, I would guzzle some of that stuff immediately to get the ketone bodies up to lower inflammation, lower glucose and everything. But I do it in the day-to-day through my diet, so I don't worry about that kind of stuff. All right, thank you, Facebook. Let's pop over here now to Twitch. What's up, Twitch? Thank you guys for being here. If you haven't joined Twitch yet, you guys, this is my newest platform. I had to get rid of YouTube. Too many glitches. I think they're preventing me from going live now for some reason. I can still post the video after it's done, but trying to go live, it just doesn't let me do it. So go follow me over on Twitch. Download the Twitch app. I'm Jimmy Moore Rants over there. So if anything happens on Instagram and Facebook, you will find me over on Twitch. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. Cariana says, maybe it's because they don't have the unholy alliance of big food in the USDA in those countries. I'm trying to remember the context of that comment. Marcus says, I think I'll start adding MCT oil to my daily cup of bone broth. Thanks for the info. Yeah, MCT is a great precursor to beta-hydroxybutyrate, getting that good level of ketones in your blood. Yeah, I mean, if ever there was an argument for wanting to have more ketone bodies, what I just shared with you guys today in this new study, I don't know how any more clear to make it than that. Paul says, is 2 ounces of organic palm juice daily on keto? I think it helped my GFR. I don't drink palm juice. I've seen it out there. I did try it one time. Not a fan. That was kind of gross, but it's pretty unsweet. So, I mean, if it's giving you benefit, go for it. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't help you. Where do you get clean ketone esters, says Kelly. So, there is this company out there, Ketone Aid, Ketoneade, kind of like Gatorade, except it's Ketone Aid, and they got these little shot things. The first versions of those ketone esters were so gross, they tasted like rocket fuel. It was disgusting. Literally, you had to like hold your nose, shoot it down, and then immediately like get something in your mouth to wash it down, water or seltzer water, something. It was gross. In fact, when they sent the initial ones, they sent the ketone ester, and they sent like some mint, sugar-free mint gum, because they knew it was going to be gross in your mouth. It's so but that's the major one, and Dr. Veach, that was his company, and so I think his is pretty good if you wanted to try the ketone esters, Ketone Aid. They don't pay me or anything, but I'm in the know. I know all these companies, I know all these people, but thank you for that. So guys, the bottom line, this study, I hope it really helped you today, because when you hear, oh my gosh, ketosis is bad for your heart, you're going to die of a heart attack, they usually focus on the cholesterol or the red meat or the saturated fat. And none of those things are negative, because they all induce this ketosis, which then give you the benefit to your heart health. And I hope this helped you out today. And that's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. And as always, you can engage live in the content. Come follow me. I'm right here on Instagram, Jimmy Rants over there. We are here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for being here today. We also simulcast live on Facebook and on Twitch. You can watch the replay right here on the Jimmy Rants Instagram page. IGTV is where you can watch the replay. The replay is also over on Twitch. We also put it up over on YouTube, as well as at Jimmy RANTS.com. And just a reminder, today is the drop date for my new interview on the Living La Vida Low Carb show. I interviewed Bella, the the butter and steak gal. I'm sure she eats bacon too, but butter and steak gal here on Instagram is what she goes by. Had a delightful conversation with her. The video of the interview is up on my IGTV on Living Low Carb Man. It's also up over on YouTube, and it will air today on the Living La Vida Low Carb show, wherever you listen to podcasts, llvlc.com. All right, guys, tomorrow on Jimmy Rants, we're going to talk about all of these questions and all of the ramifications of what has happened to us since we started doing all the things we're doing to deal with 9-1-DIVOC. Because all we hear about is all the focus on, oh my gosh, we got to prevent cases, we got to prevent people from dying and overrunning the hospitals and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's all they're talking about when it comes to the ramifications of this. There have been a whole lot more ramifications than just the direct impact of 9-1-DIVOC. And so we're going to talk about what some of those other effects are. I got a great story to talk about that. And so tune in tomorrow, 11 a.m., and we'll see you then.